So going into this game, I said basically this was a lose-lose for Michigan. Although, if there was a bigger loss, it would be Ohio State winning. Now, I'm only saying this because there's really nothing. I got no opinion on either of these teams. If anything, I think it's kind of funny that Notre Dame and Ohio State ended up being the teams to make it to the championship game. Because if you would have said like 3 years ago, or if you would have lived by the rules of 3 years ago, I don't think either of these teams would have even made the playoffs. Maybe Notre Dame, maybe, but like it would be a tough sell. It'd be a really really tough sell. Um, Now as far as the game goes, it was really not entertaining. I mean, like let's not kid ourselves. The final score, it was an 11-point game, but the game was over at the half. I mean, 21-7 at the half, and then it was 31 to like 2. I think it was 31-7 at a certain point. And then, Notre Dame started to score some garbage time touchdowns, made it look a little bit closer. Look, Ohio State, they lost a game to Michigan and were turned into this. I mean, like, or rather, what I should say more accurately, they were always this. But for whatever reason, they just like tripped on themselves in that Michigan game. And I think unfortunately for the rest of the college football world, everybody basically just thought, oh, okay, they're done. They're just going to fall over and die. But they used it as a rallying cry. It was similar to, I'm sure Michigan fans are going to love this, similar to when, the whole Connor Stallion stuff started to break for Michigan, where, something that you thought could be used against you, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. Our coach is getting suspended. We got this crazy guy with a 1 billion-page manifesto talking about how he's going to take over. Like, oh my gosh, we look so bad. Are we sure we're really that good? And it became a rallying cry. It became a rallying cry in this way for Ohio State. Like, they get exposed in their house. Michigan plants the flag. Fight breaks out. You think, okay, Ohio State's just, they got Michigan on the mind. They're not thinking of bigger things. Reality is they were thinking of bigger things. They were thinking of being national champions. And look, for me, as a Spartan, I got to say, I do love that Michigan can't even have 1 year of having that national championship to rub in Ohio State's face. Like, they don't even get that. They get a singular season, basically, to have that. And then Ohio State's like, no, we'll just win it. And now we have the more recent national championship. And they did it in a 12-team playoff, which you might say is more difficult, presumably. But the thing I had about the college football playoff, though, regardless of the Michigan stuff, because I'm tiresome, I don't want to have to bring it up and just start yelling at each other for no apparent reason. I wanted to talk about the 12-team playoff in and of itself. Was this experiment worth it? And I kind of mentioned this going into the Final Four, but I think now that it's completed, we have a winner, all that stuff. We get to see all those games. Was this a success? Because I think a lot of people online, generally speaking, had a pretty positive opinion of it. Now, I'm going to go kind of one at a time here, at least one round at a time, and kind of rank it in a way. Like, the first round, terrible. All right? I think everybody agrees the first round of this college football playoff, terrible. And maybe that's because 12 teams is just a little too much. There just isn't 12 teams that realistically can compete for the national championship. Tennessee did not belong. SMU did not belong. Indiana, fun story, but unfortunately, they just did not belong. Clemson did not belong. None of those teams belong, basically. The second round, the quarterfinals, where you actually had the actual bowl games or actual neutral site games, a similar-ish story. Georgia, they didn't have a quarterback. It was pretty much a bad spot for them. They were down a quarterback, even though they had just won the SEC. It was a tough way to get it. And plus, you had, obviously, the horrible tragedy, which is out of the control of anybody, that happened just before the game. So you had to delay the game an extra day. So the product of the game, I don't think, was particularly well because, guys were probably really poised, ready to play. And then, tragedy strikes, and there's no way to control that, obviously. The Boise State-Penn State game was terrible. Again, this was a blowout. Penn State murdered. Even Ashton Johnson, one of the best running backs coming out of college football, he didn't even really have an amazing game. Ohio State murdered Oregon. That was just a surprise. Like, it was a bad game, but it wasn't, it was the only reason that was even memorable was that it was like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen. Because Oregon was the 1 seed and they were undefeated going into that game. So now the best game, I think, and this probably goes throughout the entire playoff, was the Texas-Arizona State game. You get this double overtime, the crazy comeback for Arizona State, almost beating Texas. I really thought watching that game live they were going to do it. But man, like that, it was tough to see them lose. But it was probably the most entertaining college football game I've seen in a very long time. Certainly one of the most entertaining playoff games the college football has ever put out. And they put out a few. I'm not trying to totally disparage the playoff. But all that being said, we get to the Final Four. So presumably, Final Four, these should be, in theory, the 4 best teams. We have Notre Dame beating Penn State. It's a closer game, but it was just kind of a boring game from what I really remember. It ended up being just a 3-point lead or 3-point win for Notre Dame to go to the national championship. But I gotta feel like most people, and maybe I'm totally off base here, most people did not think Penn State was going to win that game. Like, everybody was just like, all right, James Franklin, the moment is going to be too big for him at some point. And lo and behold, it was. It was the Final Four. But it did buy us being Big Ten fans, 4 more years, roughly, of James Franklin. So, it works for me. And then the Texas-Ohio State game. This game was pretty entertaining, I'd say. It ended up being a little bit further away, but it was a pretty close game throughout. This was probably the most Final Four-ish looking game of the two. And yeah, that Jack Sawyer scoop and score, that was incredible. That was amazing. I do wish the game would have been a little bit closer near the end there, but I still think it was a highly entertaining game. Very, very good stuff from both those teams. And then, of course, you get the national championship game, which was a blowout, and I went to bed at the half. Not at the half. I went to bed around the midpoint of the third quarter, around when it was 31-7. I think it was 31-7 at one point. Again, it wasn't a particularly memorable game. The first drive of Notre Dame, I was like, wait a minute. Is this actually going to be a really historic game? Is Ohio State going to blow this? And then no, they were not. So, yeah, still, overall, it wasn't terrible. It probably would have been better if you just did 8 teams, maybe. Just gotten rid of the first round there. It left the first round really left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, myself included. The rest of the games, you had a lot of blowouts, a lot of games that just really weren't much. And you had games that were surprisingly good, like the Texas-Arizona State game. But overall, I just to me, and again, this is just me being old school, I guess. I just don't really want a playoff in college football. And I know maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but I would just much rather you have, number 1 and number 2 team in the country. They play in the national championship. Injuries aside, that's just what it is. You have Oregon and Georgia going at it. Would it have been the best game? I don't know. Probably not. Oregon probably would have blown them out because Georgia was dead at that point. But look, I think a lot of people thought that Oregon was going to beat Ohio State or that, Texas was going to blow out Arizona State. You never know. The point is you have an objective marker. Obviously, a lot of people want to change the seedings. They want to fix, who's playing who and how you get to where you are. I just don't think you're really going to ever perfect something like this because college football, we're talking about 100+ teams playing for the same national championship. That's not anything like any other professional sports league. So to treat it like it's the NFL, it's just not going to work. One of the reasons that, for example, March Madness works in college basketball is because, for one, it's 68 or 64 teams? I think 68 counting the plan. So that's about half of the teams in the same division, right? Same level. And basketball is just a much more volatile sport. It's obviously single game eliminations, that goes without saying, but it's a much more volatile sport, right? Like one guy can just go off and shoot, 3 for or shoot, 7 for 10 from 3, and that's 21 points, right? like that. It's a game more cohesive when it comes to creating upsets, creating unexpected wins. Like, did anybody really think that, for example, Arizona State was going to beat Texas? Like, whether or not you thought the game was going to be good is a different question. Because obviously I don't think anybody thought the game was going to be good, but did anybody think they were going to win? Probably not. I mean, like, you can look at the spreads that Vegas puts out for what that's worth. A lot of these games were not expected to be particularly close. And again, they can be wrong. It's all a huge thing. Look, my whole point is this. I think the heart is maybe in the right place for college football to try to do something different, try to emulate how the NFL is structured. But I think the more you kind of fall away from what college football was and what, like, a lot of people who grew up with it, didn't grow up with this. And a lot of people that like the love for it came from, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 playing in the Rose Bowl, for example, and the national championship being the top 2 ranked teams, and all that stuff. Like, I don't know. I know it's not necessarily a popular opinion, but it is my opinion, and I can only give you my opinion. I can't give you other people's opinion. I guess I can. I can find them. Somebody can give me their opinion. I can just read it, but it's not what we do on this show. So, what do you think? If you like the college football play, let me know. I don't know. I thought it was okay. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I thought there were some really good games. Texas, Arizona State. Texas, Ohio State. Thought those were really good games for the most part. But then there was a lot of games that I was just totally out of in like the second quarter. Most of them, actually. Like, if a grand total, most of them I was just not particularly interested in. But hi, it's me again. If you enjoyed what you just saw, hit the like and subscribe button. We do live shows every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there.